Hello everyone, I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Dane. Welcome to the Malazan Brotherhood podcast.
Today we will be discussing Book 2, Chapter 11 of House of Chains, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is not a replacement to reading the books.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Today's episode may be triggering for individuals afflicted with coniomarchophobia, specifically the fear of marching through dust clouds, and thus any such individuals should stop listening now.
You've been warned. Our show is listener-supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we are posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, Chapter 11, Part 1. The chapter begins with an excerpt. Quote, "This was a path she did not welcome," end quote. And this was from The Shaikh Rebellion by Tersabal. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this. Who are we talking about? I guess Shaikh? It's got to be, because it's from the Shaikh Rebellion.
It feels pretty accurate. A path she did not welcome kind of feels like pretty self-explanatory, I guess.
Okay. Doing something she doesn't like.
Yeah.
Okay.
We interrupt this broadcast from the future.
A future version of ourselves have appeared magically as I've realized how silly I was being the first time we're reading through this. Chapter 11, Part 1 opens with a quote. "This was a path she did not welcome," end quote. This was about the Shaikh Rebellion by Tersabal. I didn't know what this was about, and I said, it has to be about Shaikh, right? Immediately after this, we start talking about Gamut and Tavora. We're with the army leaving Aaron.
Okay.
So while this is about the Shaikh Rebellion, it is probably Tavora that did not welcome the path, not Shaikh.
Ah, okay. I mean, I guess the Shaikh Rebellion immediately made me think that it was about Shaikh. So, a hell of a blunder there.
As we're about to see in this section, we're going to start talking about Coltane and how Tavor is kind of following in his footsteps in some ways. So it is now very obvious to me who this is referring to. But the Kamraun of the past, who I will give some grace at that time, had no idea what was going on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not perfect. That's an understatement of the year right there.
Do you agree with my assessment now? Come back and looking at it again?
To be fair, you could almost take that either way. It could, I suppose, be about either of them. Do you disagree with that?
I think Felicin wants to get revenge on Tavora.
Yes. Yes. Yes, she does. She is eager for that. So it does make a lot more sense for it to be Tavora. All right. Good catch, my friend.
Hopefully I don't have to have any more of these emergency catch-up episodes from 5 weeks in the future coming back.
Yeah, don't make a habit of it.
We now return to our normal broadcast. The breaths of the horses plumed in the chill morning air. Dawn had but just arrived, the air hinting nothing of the heat the coming day would deliver. Wrapped in the furs of a veteran, old sweat making the lining of his helm clammy as the touch of a corpse, Fist Gamut sat motionless on his Wiccan mount, his gaze fixed on the adjunct. The hill just south of...
That groan.
The hill just south of Erugimon, where Coltane had died, had come to be known as the Fall. Countless humps on the summit and slopes indicated where bodies had been buried, the metal-strewn earth already cloaked in grasses and flowers. Ants had colonized this entire hill, or so it seemed. The ground swarmed with them, their red and black bodies coated in dust, yet glittering nonetheless as they set about their daily tasks. In Texas, we have fire ant problems, and they keep popping up all over your yard. You put stuff out to get rid of them, they pop up somewhere else. I have a theory that it's really all just one big nest, like under my entire neighborhood.
Okay.
And it just keeps spreading and spreading under everybody's houses, under the sidewalks on the side of the road. And I just have a vision in my head that this whole hill has turned into a giant anthill. And the whole thing is infested top to bottom with one giant anthill like the fire ants.
I could see that.
Crazy.
Yeah, that would be pretty wild. Don't you have an ant story? Didn't you get swarmed yourself by some ants?
So when I was in high school, I was a lifeguard, and you'd walk around either with sandals or bare feet. And one time I was standing somewhere talking to somebody, and then all of a sudden my feet felt like they were on fire. Apparently, I was standing on a sidewalk, but it had washed out a little bit, and some fire ants were going across it, a lot of them, like in a highway. What they do is they synchronize their attacks. And I probably got on the order of 40 or 50 bites on each foot. I'll tell you what, man, it was excruciating. My feet swelled up so bad. I mean, it was hours and hours of pain.
Yeah.
Just 1 or 2 alone is bad enough. It's not as bad as a bee sting. Very irritating, though. But like in that number, it was quite painful.
You've already got a problem with chunky ankles, so.
I have a robust frame. There's nothing I can do about that.
I'm big boned.
Literally.
I can feel your pain though. They weren't.
What, the chunky ankles as well? Okay.
Nope. They weren't red ants, but I was hiking and I wanted a little bit better vantage. And then there was kind of a flat section with one hill in the middle of this field. And so I stood up on top of it. And I was like, this is kind of mushy, but I could get up a little bit higher. And then happened to look down and see that my whole right leg was covered almost up to my knee in ants. Like I did not realize that I was standing on an ant hive. And they came up my leg, up my pants and everything. And it was more panic than anything. I didn't get bit. I think they were just black ants. They didn't bite. But still freaked me out. I was jumping and kicking and messing with my jeans to try and shake them all off. But you're red
generally
ant.
they're fairly harmless if they're not some type of stinging or biting ant, you know?
Right. It was just kind of the panic of the situation, looking down and seeing your leg covered in insects. So you take the cake on that one, both in ankles and ant bites.
I'll be walking through the house and my knee will hit a door jamb or something. Sounds like a gunshot. And my wife's just like, what is wrong with you? I'm like,
like an animal.
Gamut, the adjunct, and Tene Beralta had ridden out from the city before dawn. Outside the gates to the west, the army had begun to stir. The march would begin this day. The journey north to Raraku, to Shaik and the Whirlwind. To vengeance. Perhaps it was the rumors that had drawn Tavora out here to the fall, but already Gamut regretted her decision to bring him along. This place showed him nothing he wanted to see, nor, he suspected, was the adjunct well pleased with what they had found. Red-stained braids, woven into chains, draped across the summit, and coiled around the twin stumps of the cross that had once stood there. Dog skulls crowded with indecipherable hieroglyphs looked out along the crest through empty sockets. Crow feathers dangled from upright thrust broken arrow shafts. Ragged banners lay pinned to the ground on which were painted various representations of a broken Wiccan long knife. Icons, fetishes, a mass of detritus to mark the death of a single man. And all of it was a swarm in ants, like mindless keepers of this now hallowed ground. The 3 riders sat in their saddles in silence. Finally, after a long while, inflectionless, Tavora said, Tene Beralta. Tene Beralta replied, I, adjunct? Tavora asked, Who is responsible for all of this? Malazans from Erin? Your red blades? Tene Beralta did not immediately reply. Instead, he dismounted and strode forward, his eyes on the ground. Near one of the dog skulls he halted, crouched down and said, Adjunct, these skulls. The runes on them are Kundril. He pointed towards the wooden stumps and continued, the woven chains, Kiran Dobri. He gestured to the slope and said, the banners, unknown, possibly Billard. Crow feathers? The beads at their stems are Semk. Gamut could not keep the disbelief from his voice. He said, Semk? From the other side of the Vathar River? Tene, you must be in error. Tene Beralta shrugged. He straightened and gestured towards the rumpled hills directly north of them and said, the pilgrims only come at night, unseen, which is how they will have it. They're hiding out there, even now, waiting for night. Tavora cleared her throat, then said, Semk, Billard, these tribes fought against him, and now they come to worship. How is this? Explain, please, Tene Beralta. Tene Beralta said, I cannot, adjunct. He eyed her, then added, but, from what I understand, this is modest, compared with what lines the Erin way.
The legend of Coltane. To be receiving burial gifts and such from these tribes that he was fighting against, for him to reach that level of respect and maybe even reverence is pretty amazing.
Do you think that Coltane is an aspirational figure to many of these tribes? Having held so many at bay and sacrificing his own tribe to purchase the safe passage of the Malazans under his care?
I kind of feel like whether you were fighting against him or not, you'd have to respect the man. That's kind of the impression that I get from these tribes, why they're doing it, is just his level of capability and everything has just exceeded all expectations, and you kind of just have to tip your cap to him. That's kind of the impression that I'm getting.
Mm-hmm. The singular focus on Coltane interests me because it really was all of the Wiccans that really pulled them through.
Right.
It wasn't just one man alone. I mean, obviously, if it was another commander, it would have ended differently, but I do find it interesting that it's really so focused on him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily true. Here at this site, yes. I guess they said it was even more so on Aaron Way, and that was where the Malazan army got crucified.
That's true.
So I guess it's the entire event is being sanctified almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess if this is the specific place that Coltane fell, then that makes sense for what's going on here.
Separately, the imagery of this scene is simply amazing. I wonder if there is any significance to the ants that are infesting this hill, though. That's a detail that I wonder about.
Mm-hmm. It'd be nice to have a little bit more clarification or symbolism with ants. I'm not really sure. Unless it's just they're there doing ant things. But I don't know.
I also hope that those dog skulls weren't quote-unquote collected from living creatures just for this purpose, but I have a suspicion that they indeed were.
Oh.
You know, it's not like you just have dog skulls laying around.
I hadn't really considered that. That's pretty grisly if they're sacrificing dogs.
Just to get the skull to put here, yeah.
Yeah, nasty.
Aren't having any wild dog problems on Seven Cities continent.
Yeah.
There was silence once more, though Gamut did not need to hear her speak to know Tavora's thoughts. He thought, This is the path we now take. We must walk, step by step, the legacy. We? No, Tavora, alone. This is no longer Coltane's war, she had said to Tamul, but it seems it remains just that, and she now realizes, down in the depths of her soul, that she will stride that man's shadow, all the way to Raraku. The adjunct said, You will both leave me now. I shall rejoin you on the Aaron Way. Gamut hesitated, then said, Adjunct, the Crow clan still claim the right to ride at the forefront. They will not accept Tamul as their commander. Tavora replied, I will see to their disposition. For now, go. He watched Tene Baralta swing back onto his horse. They exchanged a glance, then both wheeled their mounts and set off at a canter along the track leading to the west gate. Gamut scanned the rock-studded ground rolling past beneath his horse's hooves. This was where the historian Duerker drove the refugees towards the city, this very sweep of empty ground, where, at the last, that old man drew rein on his weary, loyal mare, the mare that Tamul now rode, and watched as the last of his charge was helped through the gate. Whereupon, it was said, he finally strode into the city. Gamut wondered what had gone through the man's mind at that moment, knowing that Coltane and the remnants of the Seventh were still out there, fighting their desperate rearguard action, knowing that they had achieved the impossible.
I think it was almost total exhaustion, wasn't it? Maybe mixed with some anguish and anger?
I went back and looked it up, and he wheeled his horse around one last time to stare back across the continent towards the whirlwind, and his mind conjured the image of a chain of corpses hundreds of leagues long.
Ooh.
And confronted with the sheer scale of the tragedy and survival, he felt that the full weight of the meaning of the event was completely beyond his grasp, and likely beyond anybody's ability to understand. So he finally turned his mount around and rode through the gates into the city, and he was in a detached state, entirely ignoring the triumphant cries of the soldiers cheering from the walls above.
Okay.
Now, immediately before this, he had found a child no older than 18 months old wandering among the final refugees, and he had picked the child up, and Keneb came out. Duerker passed the child to Keneb. This was Grub, actually.
Right,
so that's
okay.
where he appeared. And I guess they never found Grub's parents, and so Keneb had to adopt him.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was an interesting connection because Grub was just introduced
right
last chapter.
With the long bone.
Yeah, with the long bone. Yeah, he held
That's
it
right.
up. Yeah. Finally, Tamul riding that Wiccan mare, that's pretty cool because that mare went through a lot. There was a time when Duerker was trying to catch up to Coltane and the refugee train where he pushed her pretty hard, and then the Wiccans were able to get the horse back up to health. And then she survived that whole ordeal.
Right.
That's the one
all
he
those
rode
horse
all
wives.
the way.
Yeah, because that took a while, right? From him trying to catch up to them. I mean, I don't remember if it was weeks.
It was weeks.
Yeah.
It was like a really long time.
Yeah, you're right. He was riding hard. I remember that section. That's right.
Duerker had delivered the refugees, only to end up staked to a tree. It was beyond him, Gamut realized, to comprehend the depth of that betrayal. A body never recovered, no bones laid to rest.
We know why this is, too. For me, these are enjoyable moments as a reader when we get to know something that the characters don't. And then I guess it's the opposite of what we had the other week, where the characters are having some kind of conversation that we're not privy to. I like both sides.
Agreed. That was a heartbreaking scene at the end of Memories of Ice when Duerker finally spoke up at Karul's bar on their opening night.
Oh, yeah.
When he started to tell the story of Coltane and the Chain of Dogs. I mean, every time I think about that, I start getting emotional because it's such a tough scene, knowing what he went through and knowing what he's about to talk about.
Yeah. Well, especially what you had just said, that, when he was confronted with the scale of the tragedy, that it was beyond anybody's ability to truly understand. And now you're trying to retell that to somebody who wasn't there. The magnitude of it is extremely heavy.
Yeah, and he had that cloth in his hand with the lady's name on it.
Yeah.
That Marine's name.
That's something that really stuck with him. That was hard for him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Gamut's side, Tenebralta rumbled, "There is so much." Gamut asked, "So much?" Tenebralta said, "To give answer to, Gamut. Indeed, it takes words from the throat, yet the silence it leaves behind, that silence screams." Discomforted by Tene's admission, Gamut said nothing. Tene went on, "Pray remind me that Tavora is equal to this task." Gamut thought, "Is that even possible? She must be, else we are lost." Then he said, "She is." Tenebralta said, "One day, Gamut, you shall have to tell me what she has done to earn such loyalty as you display." Gamut thought, "Gods, what answer to make to that? Damn you, Tene, can you not see the truth before you? She has done nothing. I beg you, leave an old man to his faith."
This feels like a real tough spot for Gamut to be in. Like, he's carrying water for her. And what has she done up to this point? Nothing we've seen. But Gamut has to keep defending her and her capabilities as a leader.
Yeah, she hasn't done anything yet, but he knows her character. He's watched her handle the affairs of the House of Perrin in the absence of her parents. So I think his faith is not entirely without reason. And sure, there could be some favoritism there, similar to how parents view their own children. He's watched her grow up for several years. Mm-hmm. But I think she's keeping it together very well. She hasn't had any loss of emotional control, even with all the setbacks she's had since she arrived in Arryn. Think about what she went through on that assembly ground when the army wasn't assembling correctly. Mm-hmm. You could easily crash out at that moment and have a fit. But she held it together and endured the whole thing. And then all of the other stuff. She's really locked down emotionally. And in some ways, that's really good. And sometimes it's not good because you want to hide all of the negative stuff from people that look up to you. But at the same time, if you're just dead all the time and that you never have any positive emotional side of it, it's also equally not as good, I think.
Yeah.
It's really critical that leaders don't lose control in front of other people.
I mean, that's really the only thing we've seen from her is her emotional capacity to not have complete meltdown or blow up or anything like that. She takes everything in stride so far. And if nothing else, I guess that's a pretty redeeming quality for her at this point.
Yeah, so far. Elsewhere, Gessler growled, "Wish whatever you like, but faith is for fools." Strings cleared the dust from his throat and spat onto the side of the track. Their pace was tortuously slow, the 3 squads trailing the wagon loaded down with their supplies. Then he asked Gessler, "What's your point? A soldier knows but one truth, and that truth is, without faith, you are already as good as dead. Faith in the soldier at your side. But even more important, and no matter how delusional it is in truth, there is the faith that you cannot be killed. Those two and those two alone, they are the legs holding up every army." Gessler grunted, then waved at the nearest of the trees lining Arryn Way. He said, "Look there and tell me what you see. No, not those hood-damned fetishes, but what's still visible under all that mess. The spike holes, the dark stains of bile and blood. Ask the ghost of the soldier who was on that tree. Ask that soldier about faith." Strings retorted, "A faith betrayed does not destroy the notion of faith itself. In fact, it does the very opposite." Gessler said, "Maybe for you, but there are some things you can't step around with words and lofty ideals, Fid. And that comes down to who is on that vanguard somewhere up ahead. The adjunct, who just lost an argument with that pack of hoary Wiccans. You've been lucky you had Whiskey Jack and Dujek. Do you know who my last commander was? Before I was sentenced to the Coastal Guard? Corbolo Dom. I'd swear that man had a shrine to Whiskey Jack in his tent, but not the Whiskey Jack you know. Corbolo saw him differently. Unfulfilled potential, that's what he saw.
Wow. I had forgotten this little bit, that there would, of course, be soldiers who would have served under Corbolo that weren't renegades and didn't join what would become the Dog Slayers and then the Whirlwind Army.
Yeah, I forgot that as well. I guess they dodged it by being at some secluded outpost among the Coastal Guard instead of immediately in the vicinity of Corbolo Dom's forces when they decided to defect.
Yeah.
And I also wonder at what the ratio was of those that decided to go with Corbolo Dom and those they executed because they didn't follow them.
That makes you wonder if they're actually loyal. We've talked about this a little bit as well regarding loyalty. Are they actually loyal to Corbolo, or do they just not want to get executed, so they go along with it as well?
I suspect that when you have an army like that doesn't have some higher level ideal, we'll talk about this in a little bit here, something that they believe in, that they stand for, there's no foundation holding that army together. It is literally just opportunists that are survivalists, basically. They're just trying to make it through the world without any backing to it.
Yeah.
Corbolo Dom seems to have his ideals of what he believes in. He wants to reshape the empire by becoming the emperor and culling all the people that he finds less than desirable as members of the empire. We also saw the people that were in the Ashok regiment that were sieging Biritis. They had personal vendettas against Kindly, who was in Biritis.
Right.
There doesn't seem to be any moral foundation there or anything holding those people together. I think that's a critical thing missing from those armies.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. There's another thing that I find pretty interesting relating to this conversation between Fiddler and Gessler about faith in the people around you and all that. And it's this feeling of being invincible as a younger person. I think it's a kind of a well-known philosophy or idea, like based in real life, and maybe why a lot of the military is made up of a certain age group. I'm thinking of something that I came across recently. I'm not sure if he was a historian or a psychologist, but this David Elkind, something about personal fable theory. I just kind of find this stuff fascinating about how the mind works at that age where you kind of have this invincible type of feeling that nothing bad can happen to you. And I think that's something that a lot of us can kind of relate to. I know I've gone through the same thing as a younger person. It's like why you behave the way you do and why you do kind of more reckless things just because you don't think that anything is going to get you. I like that. And Gessler is kind of displaying the other side of that indestructible theory, where I guess some researchers would say that that theory is fragile and that after a soldier has seen someone close to them get hurt or killed, and I'm sure Gessler has seen plenty of that in his career in the military. But every time I say something like this, the characters go and prove me wrong a little bit. We'll see if that happens, but that's kind of my feeling on it at this point.
I think it's a pretty complex topic because youth does play into it a little bit, but I also have been thinking a lot about what people who have unshakable faith are capable of accomplishing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific to a god. It could be an ideal. So I have some specific examples from our world where I think about this. So the first one that comes to mind is the Siege of Malta, which was in 1565, where the Knights Hospitalier, numbering roughly 500 and a few thousand additional commoners and soldiers on the Isle of Malta, they held the island against between 30 and 40,000 members of the Ottoman Empire. They defended the fort at St. Elmo. Even though they knew that fort was a death trap, they held it for 28 days, far longer than the Turks anticipated. Faith was a critical component for these knights because they were basically warrior monks. So they were praying all the time. They were starving in there, but it was their faith that held them together through this because they thought that that was the last hope of saving their religion before the Muslim Turks swept into Europe.
Okay.
They felt they had nowhere else that they could go. They had to stand. That's one example. Then there was the Battle of Saragari. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. This was in 1897. This is where the unshakable faith was displayed by the Sikh tradition of Khalsa, where 21 Sikh soldiers of the British Indian Army defended a small outpost against 10,000 Afghan tribesmen. They held it for 7 hours, which is crazy, against 10,000. Every single Sikh soldier fought to their death rather than abandoning their post. And they were motivated by the Sikh code of conduct, which emphasizes standing against injustice regardless of the odds.
Wow.
Another example, and this is probably closer to the Malazan example that we're talking about, where Fiddler is talking about faith in the soldier next to you. There's Pavlov's house at the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942, where there was a single junior sergeant named Yakov Pavlov and a small platoon of roughly 25 men. They held a 4-story apartment building against waves of German infantry and tanks for 58 days.
Wow.
The house was so well defended that it was marked as a fortress on German maps. And this was driven by a mix of not a step back Soviet ideology and a grim localized faith in the man to their left and right. There's other examples as well, like the Alamo. They had an ideal that was related to the independence of their region. So throughout history, there's many examples of people when they truly believe something, that they are capable of more than someone that would be in Corbeau Dom's army, for example, where there is nothing underlying why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't have a belief that drives them to do what they need to do to defend or accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Those are some good examples. I like that. Enjoy this bit of history and the way we can compare it to what's going on in these stories. It's a fun thought experiment to see those parallels, I guess.
There is another example in the Malazan books that I just thought of. Gruntle on that house.
Yeah, that's almost exactly like this Pavlov's house.
Yes.
Interesting. See, these are those things, those fun little bits where you wonder, does Erikson have these pieces of history too that he draws from? Is that something similar that he's read about somewhere and thought this is a fun way to tie it in?
These are human things.
Yeah, I guess so.
All of these are just humans rising to an occasion and being inspirational figures for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason these stories stick out in history.
Right. And I guess why you can find enjoyment and something in common with the characters. You actually feel an emotion instead of just kind of blasting through it and not feeling anything.
Strings glanced over at Gessler. Stormy and Tar were walking in step behind the two sergeants, close enough to hear, though neither had ventured a comment or opinion. Strings asked, "Unfulfilled potential? What in Beru's name are you talking about?" Gessler replied, "Not me, Corbeau Dom. If only the bastard had been hard enough, he used to say. He could have taken the damn throne. Should have. As far as Dom is concerned, Whiskey Jack betrayed him, betrayed us all, and that's something that renegade Napin won't forgive." Strings growled, "Too bad for him, since there's a good chance the Empress will send the whole Genevacan army over in time for the final battle. Dom can take his complaints to Whiskey Jack himself."
They don't know. Also, is this a little insight to why Corbeau was so happy when he heard Whiskey Jack was dead?
It's a strange way to react. Wanting someone dead because they didn't do what you thought they should? It would have made more sense if it was to get him out of the way so that Corbeau Dom could more easily take the throne. You know what I mean?
Maybe there's a part of that, though. Maybe he thought that Whiskey Jack was so formidable that if he was still around, that it would be much harder for him to go through with the plan he wants to take over. I don't know.
That was going to be my next thing. I don't think Corbeau would be happy if Whiskey Jack was emperor. He's saying if he was hard enough, we would have been better off. But the way I hear Corbeau talking about what he wants to do when he becomes the emperor, Whiskey Jack wasn't in alignment with any of that.
Right.
Corbeau Dom's talking about executing everybody that doesn't agree with the way he sees things and basically ethnically cleansing half the empire, you know, if it sounded
that,
like.
All the mages, every magic user and all that, like he hated all of them too. Yeah. You're right about that. They're definitely not in alignment. There'd be, like, he'd try and take the throne. There'd be another battle between him and Whiskey Jack and all that.
Yeah. He's just a bad apple. Sounds like he's got a bad attitude.
Yeah.
And he needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, he does.
Gessler laughed and said, "A pleasant thought, but my point was, you've had commanders worthy of the faith you put in them. Most of the rest of us didn't have that luxury. So we got a different feeling about it all. That's it. That's all I was trying to say." The Aaron Way marched past on both sides, transformed into a vast open-air temple, each tree cluttered with fetishes, cloths braided into chains, figures painted on the rough bark to approximate the soldiers who had once writhed there on spikes driven in by Corbeau Dom's warriors. Most of the soldiers ahead and behind Strings walked in silence. Despite the vast, empty expanse of blue sky overhead, the road was oppressive. There had been talk of cutting the trees down, but one of the adjunct's first commands upon arriving in Erin had been to forbid it. Strings wondered if she now regretted her decision. I wonder if something would eventually come of this. All this worship could lead to Aaron Way getting sanctified in some way. Don't things tend to gain power when they are worshipped in this world?
Yeah, we have talked about that with Troll and Onrak and stuff like that. Kind of like those stone statues of the Hounds of Darkness and Shadow and all that. So I could see that happening here too. I mean, it seems like it's already beginning, whether they want it or not. It's something that all the fetishes and trinkets and things like that, they're already there. People are already coming out. So it's beginning. It makes me wonder a little bit if she did cut them down, if you would have kind of a revolt. Like you get the opposite effect. People who are going there to worship, you take all the trees down and it's like people lose their mind over that.
Yeah. I was thinking about that Torii Gate from Hiroshima that is still standing.
Oh, that I'm not familiar with.
Japanese people are very sensitive to depictions of these gates. It's the gate that you think of. It's two beams and then it's got the curved on top.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen the one where it's like the red ones in a row going up the hill in Japan up to a temple.
Oh, like kind of like go along a path?
Yeah.
Okay.
So after the bombs were dropped, one of them that's damaged is still standing in Hiroshima, and it's like a monument there now. They have it there. There was a big uproar when Assassin's Creed Shadows came out because they had broken Torii gates in there, and it's really frowned upon in Japan to depict them this way because that's a symbol for them.
Okay.
I think it's a similar type thing here with the trees, right? Where the people of Seven Cities that understand what happened at the Chain of Dogs, like you're saying, if they cut these down, it would be received very poorly, just like if that damaged Torii Gate was taken down.
Yeah, I think that's right. Those two stories seem like they're in quite good alignment.
String's gaze traveled up to one of the 14th's new standards, barely visible through clouds of roiling dust up ahead. Trigger warning. She had understood the whole thing with the finger bones well enough, understood the turning of the omen. The new standard well attested to that. A grimy, thin-limbed figure holding a bone aloft, the details in shades of dun colors that were barely visible on the yellow ochre field. The border a woven braid of the imperial magenta and dark gray. A defiant figure standing before a sandstorm. That the standard could as easily apply to Shaikh's army of the apocalypse was a curious coincidence. Strings thought, as if Tavora and Shaikh, the two armies, the forces in opposition, are in some way mirrored reflections of the other. There were many strange occurrences in all this, nibbling and squirming beneath String's skin like bot-fly larvae, and it seemed indeed that he was feeling strangely fevered throughout the day. Strains of a barely heard song rose up from the depths of his mind on occasion, a haunting song that made his flesh prickle, and stranger still, the song was entirely unfamiliar. Then Strings thought, mirrored reflections, perhaps not just Tavora and Shaikh. What of Tavora and Coltane? Here we are, reversing the path on that blood-soaked road. And it was that road that proved Coltane to most of those he led. Will we see the same with our journey? How will we see Tavora the day we stand before the whirlwind? And what of my own return? To Raraku, the desert that saw me destroyed only to rise once more, mysteriously renewed. A renewal that persists, since for an old man I neither look nor feel old. And so it remains for all of us bridge burners, as if Raraku stole something of our mortality and replaced it with something else.
Every time we read something that references how similar these armies are, I can't help but think, if these people knew Tavora and Felicin were sisters, how would that change things? But I guess then again, Tavora doesn't even know where Felicin is.
It would definitely add an additional layer of hype to this conflict. That's the type of stuff that Dong King would love to have, like for a title fight in a boxing match.
Yeah,
two sisters going at it.
That's funny. Also, I'm wondering a little what Fiddler's talking about. He says the desert that destroyed him only to rise again. Is this the mage hunt involving Quick Ben and everybody? We know that's how the Bridgeburners got their name. I'm wondering, is it also his involvement in the Path of Hands? Part of that was in Raraku as well? Or maybe he's reflecting on something else entirely?
I think this is specifically related to what all the Bridgeburners went through as they chased Quick Ben across Raraku.
Okay.
They shouldn't have survived that. The bridge to their past was burned and they came out of that experience transformed. So I think it's specifically that.
Okay. All right.
Do you have other theories?
I think that one makes the most sense. And I guess originally that is kind of what I thought. He says it, it remains for all of us bridge burners in his thought there. Mm-hmm. But I was just curious if there could be a double meaning there, since the Path of Hands also took place in Raraku and the Spirit Walker song and all that kind of stuff all tying together. So the formation of the bridge burners, I guess, makes the most sense.
He glanced back to check on his squad. None were lagging, which was a good sign. He doubted any of them were in the shape required for the journey they were now on. The early days would prove the most difficult, before marching in full armor and weapons became second nature. Not that it would ever prove a comfortable second nature. This land was murderously hot and dry, and the handful of minor healers in each of the companies would recall this march as a seemingly endless nightmare of fending off heat, prostration, and dehydration.
The dehydration.
High-quality H2O. There was no way yet to measure the worth of his squad. Korik certainly had the look, the nature, of the mailed fist that every squad needed, and the stubborn set to Tar's blockish features hinted at a will not easily turned aside. There was something about the lass, Smiles, that reminded Strings all too much of Sari. The remorseless chill of her eyes belonged to those of a murderer, and he wondered at her past. Bottle had all the diffident bluster of a young mage, probably one versed in a handful of spells from some minor warren. The last soldier in his squad, of course, the sergeant had no worries about. He'd known men like Cuddle all his life, a burlier, more miserable version of Hedge. Having Cuddle there was like coming home. The testing would come, and it would probably be brutal, but it would temper those who survived. They were emerging from the Aran Way, and Gessler gestured to the last tree on their left. In a low voice, he said, "That's where we found him." Strings asked who. Gessler replied, "Duiker." We didn't let on, since the lad, Truth, was so hopeful. Next time we came out, though, the historian's body was gone. Stolen. You've seen the markets in Aran, the withered pieces of flesh the hawkers claim belong to Coltane, or Bolt, or Duiker. The broken long knives, the scraps of feathered cape. Strings was thoughtful for a moment, then he sighed and said, "I saw Duiker but once, and that at a distance. Just a soldier the Emperor decided was worth schooling." Gessler said, "A soldier indeed. He stood on the front line with all the others. A crusty old bastard with his short sword and shield." Strings said clearly, something about him caught Coltane's eye. After all, Duiker was the one Coltane chose to lead the refugees. Gessler said, "I'd guess it wasn't Duiker's soldiering that decided Coltane, Strings. It was that he was the imperial historian. He wanted the tale to be told, and told right." Strings said, "Well, it's turned out that Coltane told his own tale. He didn't need a historian, did he?" Gessler shrugged and said, "As you say. We weren't in their company long, just long enough to take on a shipload of wounded. I talked a bit with Duiker and Captain Lowell, and then Coltane broke his hand punching me in the face." Strings laughed as he said, "He what? No doubt you deserved it." Stormy spoke behind them. "Broke his hand, aye, Gessler, and your nose, too." Gessler replied, "My nose has been broke so many times it does it on instinct. It wasn't much of a punch." Stormy snorted and said, "He dropped you to the ground like a sack of turnips. That punch rivaled Urko's, the time he..." Gessler drawled, "Not even close. I once saw Urko punch down the side of a mud brick house. 3 blows, no more than 4 anyway, and the whole thing toppled in a cloud of dust. That nappin' bastard could punch."
So I won't say that, but that's an impressive feat. To punch down a house?
Yeah.
Damn.
Sounds like a formidable guy.
Yeah.
Strings asked, "And that's important to you?" Gessler's nod was serious. He said, "The only way any commander will ever earn my respect, Fid." Strings asked, "Planning on testing the adjunct soon?" Gessler replied, "Maybe. Of course, I'll make allowances, she being noble-born and all." Once beyond Aran Way's battered gate and the abandoned ruins of a small village, they could now see the Seti and Wiccan outriders on their flanks, a comforting sight to Strings. The raiding and sniping could begin at any time, now that the army had left the walls of Aran behind. Most of the tribes had, if the rumors were true, conveniently forgotten the truces they had won from the Malazan Empire. The old ways did not but sleep restless beneath the surface of such peoples. The landscape ahead and to either side was sun-blasted and broken, a place where even wild goats grew lean and listless. The mounded, flat-topped heaps of rubble that marked long-dead cities were visible on every horizon. Ancient raised roads, now mostly dismantled, stitched the rugged hillsides and ridges. Strings wiped sweat from his brow. He said, "Green as we are, it's about time she called." Horns sounded along the massive train's length. Motion ceased, and the shouts of water crews rose into the dusty air as they scrambled for the barrels. Strings swung about and studied his squad. They were already on the ground, sitting or sprawled, their long-sleeved undershirts darkened with sweat. Among Gessler's and Borduk's squads, the reaction to the rest halt had been identical, and Borduk's mage, Balgrid, slightly overweight and clearly unused to the armor he was wearing, looked pale and shivering. That squad's healer, a quiet small man named Lutz, was already moving towards him. Offering Strings a carnivorous smile, Korik said, "A Seti summer, when the grasslands were driven to dust by the herds, when the earth underfoot clicks like breaking metal." Smiles snapped, Hood take you. This land's full of dead things for a reason. Korik replied, aye, only the tough survive. There are tribes aplenty out there. They've left enough sign in passing. String said, you have seen that, have you? Good. You're now the squad's scout. Korik's white grin broadened. He said, if you insist, Sergeant. Strings added, unless it's night, then it'll be Smiles. And Bottle, assuming his warrant is suitable. Bottle scowled, then nodded and said, well enough, Sergeant. Smiles demanded, so what's Cuddle's role then? Lying around like a beached porpoise? Strings thought, beached porpoise? Grew up by the sea, did you? He glanced over at the veteran soldier. The man was asleep. He thought, I used to do that back in the days when nothing was expected of me, when I wasn't in charge of a damn thing. I miss those days. Then he replied, Cuddle's task is keeping the rest of you alive when I'm not close by.
I like that Strings is clocking all the things the recruits are saying, kind of tucking them away to form a mental map of who these folks are. And that's the impression I'm getting.
You got to be careful with that. Sometimes you might make a wrong assumption about someone. For example, you see someone wearing a backpack that looks like has a wing on it for additional downforce, and you think, this dude's a clown. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you do have to be careful.
You got to be careful.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't know how many other people have these same things, but my wife, one of her best friends now, started off as a workplace hatred. And now they're friends as well. It's funny. Something switches in your head. I don't know what it is, but it's
how much
comical.
of it is you see yourself in them and you're like,
You wonder.
And then once you like get to know each other, you realize how aligned you are on a lot of things.
Could be something like that. There's also something like commiseration over something that's going on in the workplace is kind of becomes the common bond that you can...
You can hate something else more than each other.
Exactly. That brings you closer than you thought it would originally.
Yeah.
That's funny.
A belligerent set to her petite features, Smiles asked, then why isn't he the corporal? String said, because he's a sapper, and you don't want a sapper for a corporal, lass. Then he thought, of course, I'm a sapper too. Best keep that to myself. I wonder what he's basing this on. Experience? Sapper being a corporal?
Maybe. Who did he have as a corporal? It was a sapper.
I don't know, but Kalam was the corporal in the squad in Gardens of the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was mentioned that you want the corporal to kind of be the enforcer of the underlings, getting their behavior in line and stuff like that. So maybe it's not a good idea to have a crazy sapper enforcing behaviors.
You're probably right on the money with that one. Kalam seems to have a better temperament than some of the sappers we've seen, certainly from what we've seen at Cuddle. So... But maybe Fiddler here, he's getting more wise as the years go on.
3 soldiers from the company's infantry arrived with water skins. String said, drink it down slow. Gessler caught his eye from a few paces away near the wagon, and Strings headed over. Borduke joined them. Gessler muttered, well, this is curious. Borduke's sickly mage, his warn's Mianus, and my mage is Tavos Pond, and he's the same. Now, Strings, your lad, Bottle. Strings said, I'm not sure yet. Borduke growled, he's also Mianus. Balgrid's confirmed it. They're all Mianus. Borduke pulled at his beard in a habitual gesture Strings knew would come to irritate him. Gessler sighed, saying, like I said, curious. This makes me wonder if there are some higher-level powers at work here. So far, Shadow seems to have a lot of influence in 7 cities in this book.
Yeah, all of it, right? Shaik and the Whirlwind is a fragment of Curled Emerlon.
Oh, I wasn't thinking of that, but yeah, good call.
And each one of these mages is Mianus. I don't know.
Then you got Dancer sending Kalam on his quest into Roraku.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not even localized to this, but Dancer has Cutter and Apsalar going to Driftavali, where the Throne of Shadow is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So very Shadow-themed.
Right. I guess we'll find out as hopefully we get some more clarification on how these all tie together.
Yeah. String said, that could be put to use. Get all 3 of them working on rituals. Illusions are damned useful when done right. Quickben could pull a few. The key is in the details. We should drag them all together tonight. A voice from beyond the wagon said, ah, and Lieutenant Randall strode into view. He continued, all my sergeants together in one place. Convenient. Gessler said, come to eat dust with the rest of us? Damn generous of you. Randall sneered as he said, don't think I haven't heard about you. Had it been my choice, you'd be one of the lads carrying those water skins, Gessler. Gessler replied, you'd go thirsty if I Randall's face darkened. He said, Captain Kenneb wants to know if there's any mages in your squads. The adjunct needs a tally of what's available. Gessler replied, none. Strings interrupted, ignoring Gessler's stare. 3, all minor, as would be expected. Tell the captain we'll be good for covert actions. Randall said, keep your opinions to yourself, Strings. 3, you said. Very well. He wheeled about and marched off. Gessler rounded on Strings. He said, we could lose those mages. Strings said, we won't. Go easy on the lieutenant, Gessler, at least for now. The lad knows nothing of being an officer in the field. Imagine telling sergeants to keep their opinions quiet. With Opan's luck, Kenneb will explain a few things to the lieutenant, eventually. Borduk muttered, assuming Kenneb's any better. He combed his beard and continued, rumor has it he was the only one of his company to survive, and you know what that likely means. String said, let's wait and see. It's a bit early to start honing the knives. Gessler said, honing the knives. Now you're talking a language I understand. I'm prepared to wait and see as you suggest, Fid. For now. All right, let's gather the mages tonight, and if they can actually get along without killing each other, then we might find ourselves a step or two ahead. Horns sounded to announce the resumption of the march. Soldiers groaned and swore as they clambered upright once more. For me, stopping, then starting back up is the hardest part. I'm better off just keeping moving because the stiffness sets in and then you're in pain.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking, I know you like to ruck, and you're doing that carrying a weighted pack and everything. You get done with your walk, 4 miles, 3 miles, whatever it is you're doing. You take a seat once you get back home, chilling out. And then that first, get up off the couch can be pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
kids are, what's wrong with you? Making all this noise.
Yeah. I used to laugh at the noises my father would make every time he got up from something, and I'm kind of wondering the same thing.
Oh, man. So this is funny. Not last Christmas, the Christmas before, I got a VR headset for the kids. Mm-hmm. I was playing Beat Saber, and then at some points you have to duck below something, and I hadn't quote unquote warmed up yet, and I was like, making all these noise trying to duck under this stuff. Kids are laughing. Yeah, it's so funny because you're in VR and you have these lightsaber things, and these things are flying at your face. You have to cut them up to music. You think you're being attacked from every direction, and you're in this world. And my wife says, it's so funny. You think you're making all these big moves, but your hands are barely moving, and you're just kind of looking around a little bit. It's just there's this way she imitates me moving. It's so funny, dude. You're just standing still. You think you're doing all this stuff, but really, in reality, you're not.
It's just as entertaining for people watching you as it is for you playing the game, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, we're going to stop there, and we will pick up the chapter where we left off next week. For standout moments.
I like that tribute to Coltane, as well as, I guess, the rest of the Fallen outside Aaron. Very impressive that it includes gifts from rival tribes.
The way that scene was painted was amazing. How legendary someone would have to be to garner so much respect from their opponents is difficult to comprehend.
Yeah, indeed. A lot of the time, I forget that there are always two sides to everything. I end up lumping Corbolo and his renegade followers into one pile, that everybody in his regiment would have followed him in deserting the Malazan Empire. But then we have that small detail from Gessler that he was under Corbolo's command and he didn't follow him. And I think that's pretty cool that there's some soldiers who had the wherewithal to not join.
He was kind of isolated because he was in a coastal town by himself. And they had to fight for themselves against whatever was going on there. Mm-hmm. I don't even think they were given the opportunity to join anything. I'm not saying he would have. That goes back to my question of, I wonder what the ratio was of people that defected versus those that actually got executed because they didn't defect.
Yeah.
Because there probably were some that got killed because the other soldiers that were defecting knew they were loyal to the Empire.
Yeah. I'd like to see that statistic sheet too.
Yeah.
I also like Fiddler's inner monologue there. A little bit about that song creeping into his memory every so often, and how that thought kind of ties back to Hebrick and Lorik's conversation from earlier, the Tano magic being elliptical, and they began their march into Raraku, and really, really cool theme.
Yeah, that's a good point. So he's just now beginning to hear the song.
Right.
We'll see how that goes for him.
Yeah.
If it's already bothering him, you can only imagine.
Yeah, as they get closer in, really cool. Also, speaking of Fiddler, he mentioned how he was glad to see his recruits not lagging behind yet, but that it was going to get harder. Can you think of a harsher first deployment? Untested, marching into the desert. You weren't getting your steps in before you joined up. You're in trouble.
Agreed. I don't know how much PT they were doing when they were cooped up in that horse shed or whatever, the stables.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting question. I have to think I would hate the jungle more, man. Like,
Yeah,
as
you
bad
still-
as the
you still
desert
do.
is, getting trench foot, I think the jungle is way worse than the
Yeah.
desert.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the desert's a cakewalk by any means, like getting 160 degrees through the hot sun. I think it would be hard as well, but the jungle,
That humidity.
yeah,
Gets ya.
I think it would be really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
The discussion around having faith for those at your side and how I was thinking about what people are capable of doing when they truly believe in something is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. So it's interesting to see it crop up in the books here and being able to look at some examples from history and also in the context of the Malazan books and see when those amazing feats that we think about happen, what some of the reasons are that people were able to do that. So I like to see that kind of stuff in the books.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thought and theme. I'd be interested to see how that pans out as we keep going in.
True. Will the dog slayers who have nothing that they believe in amount to anything? We'll see.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see about Tavor's army as well, because so far I'm not sure. I guess they have the omen that they turned. Maybe that's the start of something that's binding them all together.
Yeah. It's a good step in the right direction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Overcoming at least that first obstacle.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.